Hello everyone, welcome back to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, dated 21st February 2025. Today again we will be discussing some important topics that has appeared in today's The Hindu and The Indian Express newspapers, which are very relevant for your exam. In our first topic, we'll try to get the answer of one question, that is consumption expenditure enough to drive the economic growth or not? After that, in our second topic, we'll try to look into various dimensions of Office of Lokpal in India. Then in our simplified section, we will take up 5 articles and we will try to explain them in simplest language possible to enrich your understanding of the newspapers. Additionally, we have also incorporated some prelims pointers which is going to be very crucial for your upcoming prelims 2025 examination. So have a look on them also and stay tuned. So our first topic is consumption enough to drive growth? And the context of this topic is that a write-up has appeared emphasizing on the point why the consumption expenditure is not the sole GDP growth driver. And this particular topic is related to your GS paper 3 growth and development, and it is also very much relevant for your upcoming prelims examination. Why? Because what we have witnessed that UPSC have a tendency of asking the questions from the concepts of economy and especially from the chapters like fundamentals of economy and national income accounting. So in the last GDP growth rate data that we got for the last quarter, that is from July to September, the GDP growth rate was 5.4%, which shows that India was witnessing a kind of slowdown, and one of the reasons for that is slowdown in the consumption expenditure. Also, the government spending hasn't been very good. So why we are talking about this consumption expenditure or the government expenditure is because of the fact that while calculating the GDP, we consider 4 main components. Before looking into those components, first let's try to understand the basics of the GDP first. What exactly is the GDP? GDP is the total monetary value of all the goods and services that are produced in the domestic territory during a financial year. Then some of the other macroeconomic variables like, for example, GNP. When we add net factor income from abroad with the GDP, we get the GNP. And when we deduct depreciation, that is wear and tear of assets, from GDP, we get NDP. And when we deduct that depreciation from GNP, we get the NNP. Again, another thing that we have to understand, that when we are talking about the GDP growth rate, we are actually talking about the real GDP growth rate, right? And that real GDP growth rate is calculated at the constant price which is chosen by a particular base year, which is adjusted for the inflation. What does it mean? Let's suppose in 2011-12, which is obviously our base year for calculation of the GDP also, and government of India is thinking to change or revise this base year also, and that is the reason this topic was in news throughout the year, and you may get some questions in the prelims examination or in the mains examination from this GDP topic. So let's suppose in 2011-12, which is our chosen base year, the 10 chocolates were produced in the economy and the cost of each chocolate was 10 rupees. At this point of time, the real GDP and nominal GDP both will be same, and it will be 100, right? And we have assumed that the economy is only producing the chocolates and they are not producing any other commodities. But coming to the next financial year, that is 2012-13, let's talk about the next financial year. At this point of time, let's suppose the 20 chocolates were produced and the cost of each chocolate was, let's suppose, 20 rupees. Now here we will see that the real GDP will be calculated at this constant price which has been chosen by the fixed base year, that is 2011-12. So the real GDP will be 20 into 10, that is 200. Whereas the nominal GDP, which is not adjusted for the inflation, which is calculated at the current prices, will be 20 into 20, that is 400, right? Now, we'll see that why the consumption is not only important for driving the GDP economic growth. When we calculate the GDP, there are 3 ways by which we can calculate the GDP. And one method is the expenditure method, in which we have the 4 components. First component is the household consumption expenditure, right? Whatever the consumption that is being done by the private individuals like me and you, for example, whatever you persons are spending on the movies, on the groceries, or you people are spending on the travels, or the coaching fee that you have provided, all that will be part of the household consumption expenditure. That is your first component. Then your second component is the private investments. That is the investments that are being done by the businesses on the tangible or non-tangible assets. For example, investments they are doing in the machineries, in the equipments, in the factories, etc., or the investments that they are doing in the non-tangible assets like intellectual property rights, etc. Then we have the government expenditure, that includes the government consumption expenditure, that can be called as the whatever the expenditure they are doing on giving the salaries, etc., for their employees, or the government investment, that is the expenditure that they are doing for building of the infrastructure, etc. For example, tomorrow when you people will become IS or the IPS, when the central government or the government will be giving you salaries, that will come under this component of the government consumption expenditure. And whatever the government is spending for building of highways, roads, bridges, etc., that comes under the government investment. Then we have the net of exports, that is exports minus imports. And when we will add all these four components, we can get our GDP by the expenditure method. Now you can deduce the fact that if either of these components is going or seeing a slowdown, then obviously we will see a GDP growth slowdown. And that is the reason our GDP growth has seen a slump in the last quarterly data that we got, which came down to 5.4%. But you can see that there are four components. If that GDP growth will not be only driven by this consumption expenditure or the household consumption expenditure, if government is spending, if the privates are investing in the economy, that can also be a bright spot in ensuring that our GDP growth is on the front sheet. But we will try to understand that how these things are interrelated, right? Another thing you have to understand, that this was a very basic question that was asked in the prelims examination of 2013 about the definition of the national income. Now, if you talk about the preparation of the students, especially for the subject like economy, we can categorize into three categories. Like, let's suppose there is a person who only knows about the basic facts. Like, let's suppose the repo rate has been recently reduced and it came to 6.25%. Now, there will be this first category of students who just know this basic information that, okay, the repo rate is 6.25%. Then the second category of the students that, okay, repo rate is 6.25%, and I also know that what is the definition of the repo rate, that is, it is the short-term lending rate that on which the RBI gives short-term loans to the commercial banks. If you comes to these two categories, you would have easily cleared the prelims examination till 2016-17, because till that time UPSC was asking these kind of basic questions and definition based questions. But after the 2017, what we have seen that UPSC has changed its instance. They have now been asking questions which are conceptual in nature, which are dynamic in nature, which are interrelated to different topics. That how change or reduction in the repo rate will be linked to, or how it will ensure, or how it is related to the money supply in the economy, in the liquidity in the economy, how it is related to the currency exchange rate, how it will impact the EMIs, or how it will impact the lending rates. All that relation you will have to understand. Only then you will be able to get various answers correct in the prelims examination. Why? Because UPSC has now shifted towards asking the interrelated dynamic questions which are conceptual in nature. Until and unless you have developed that conceptual understanding properly, it will be little difficult for you to get answers of the questions that are being asked from the concepts of economics, right? Now, when we have said that, okay, this is one method, that is the expenditure method for the calculation of GDP, there are two other methods. One is the value added method, where we add all the value addition which has happened at each stage of production for all the economic activities and for all the sectors of economy. Then we have the income method, where we add all the income which has been generated by the four factors of production, that is land, labor, capital and the entrepreneurship. For the land we get rent, for labor wages, for the capital it is the interest, and for entrepreneurship we derive profits. When we will add all that, we can again get the GDP by the income method. And in India, the NSO which calculates the GDP, they calculate GDP by two methods, that is the value added method as well as the expenditure method. Now, coming to this particular reasons that why it is a concern for economy, that the GDP growth rate which we have targeted, we are not able to achieve that, or we are not on that path of growth rate which we have targeted. First is the high share of the private consumption. If you look into the distribution as the percentage of GDP expenditure from India and China. In India, the private consumption, which we have talked, is one of the major component of the GDP calculation when we talk about the expenditure method. In India, it constitutes almost 60.3% as per the data of 2023, whereas in China, it is only 39.1%. And if you talk about the investment, that is private investments, in India it is 30.8%, but in China it is much higher, which is 41.3%. Then the government consumption, it is 10.4% in India, and in China it is 16.5%. And if you talk about the exports, India's contribution is 21.8%, whereas in China it is 19.7%. But if you talk about the imports, that we are more import dependent, and that is the reason our exports is coming to a negative figure. We are having a trade deficit because of the high import dependence that we witnessed. Whereas if you compare with the China is comparatively less import dependent, and that is the reason the GDP per capita, which is calculated at the per person US dollar, it is 2481 in India and it is 12,614 in China. Now what happens? Let's suppose that obviously the private consumption, India have a large population. When this population demands goods and services, it leads to the consumption expenditure, and when people are buying goods and services, when people are demanding goods and services, it increases the production of the goods and services. When the companies will be producing more, they will also be helping in getting more employment to the people. When people are getting more employment, they will further get wages and they will further demand goods and services. So this is the general cycle which is being followed. More consumption, more demand of the goods and services, more demand of goods and services, more production of goods and services, more production of goods and services, more employment will be generated, more employment generation, more wages being taken by the particular laborers or the employees, and they will further demand goods and services. But what happens if there is demand supply mismatch? That if the people have money, they are demanding more goods and services, but supply is not very good. There can be various reasons. For example, if the privates are not interested towards investing in the economy. Why? Because they think that the current policy in the economy is not very good. For example, the GST that we will talk about is one of the policy, the indirect tax payment system, which every company has to follow. Now let's suppose if after every GST council meeting there is lot of changes in the GST rates or the slabs, then obviously it will be very difficult for the companies to comply with that GST norm. So they might be apprehensive about investing in the economy. When they will be not investing in the economy, obviously the supply of the goods and services will be affected. And when the demand is high, the supply is not very good, then that can increase the inflation in the economy. And when inflation in the economy will be very high, the purchasing power of the people will reduce, and then the consumption will further slow down. So all these things are related. And the second aspect is that when the government consumption or government investment especially increases in the economy, it leads to crowding effect. What happens? Let's suppose if the government thought of building this particular highway, okay. Now, when they are first of all building this highway, it will lead to more employment generation in this vicinity. Okay, people will be getting more jobs, etc. But when the footfall we will see on this highway, this will lead to more shops, etc. being coming. They will come on the vicinity or outskirts of this highway. That will further provide more jobs to the people, and the private companies might be investing along this highway to build various infrastructure or to build various industries or to build various shops, restaurants, etc. because the connectivity has increased. So when the government invests in the economy, it also helps in increasing or crowding the private investment, which will further create the jobs for the people and which will further increase the supply of the goods and services, which will further increase the consumption of the people with the more and more employment being generated and more wages the people are getting, and that will further increase this cycle, which is that investment or the expenditure by the government, and it is leading to crowding of private investment, and it is leading to more jobs and being created, and it is leading to more private consumption. And that is the reason when China's in private investment and this government consumption is very high comparatively to our figures, that they are less dependent on this private consumption. Why? Because private consumption is one of the very volatile situation, very volatile component. If the wages of the people will be affected, if the purchasing power of the people will be affected, obviously it will impact the overall GDP size or the overall GDP growth rate as well as the overall economic activities. Also, the stagnant investment, that if you see this data, that is investment as percentage of GDP in India by the institutional sectors, that the private corporate investment and the public investment, that is the government investment, it has been more or less stagnant from 2011-12 to 2022-23. And that is again one of the reason that why we hasn't been able to witness a high GDP growth rate. Also, the low investment as percentage of GDP. This is again a very important component, that you can see the investment as percentage of GDP in China. This is much more higher as compared to what is our investment as percentage of GDP. Okay, there is drastic difference between both the countries, and that is the reason this dependency on this consumption expenditure only leads to volatility and further impacts our GDP size as well as growth. Why? Because let's suppose COVID-19 came, which was a supply chain disruption, as well as when the COVID-19 came, the industrial activities halted. When industrial activities halted, people did not have the jobs to buy the goods and services, and that has reduced the demand of these products. Apart from that, when we have the supply chain issues, for example, increase in the transportation cost or the climate change issues which are impacting, let's suppose at the time of harvest itself, we have seen an incessant rainfall and the produce couldn't be supplied to the mandis properly. For example, what we have seen in the case of the tomato in the month of September, that there has been unseasonal rainfall, and due to that the harvesting of the tomatoes got impacted and it couldn't reach mandi on time, and which led to increase in the price of the tomatoes, and the consumption of the people declined, or the demand of these products declined. Why? Because we have witnessed a very high food inflation. So when the supply chain disruptions will happen, when the factories will not be working properly, when the people's income will be impacted, and when the inflation will be very high, this consumption expenditure will be very much impacting. And when we are highly dependent on this only one factor, on only one component, obviously we are taking a lot of risk. And second, the last aspect is of this expenditure method is the net of exports. When our industries which are producing the goods and services, they are not export ready, they are not that much competitive to compete at the global level. For example, our Everest masalas, our MDH masala, when they were sent for the exports, there were various countries which has sent them back. For example, the countries has sent them from the Singapore, from the European Union, etc. Why? Because there has been an increased presence of ethylene oxide beyond permissible limit. In India, we eat whatever we get, but the global norms are much more stringent. That the WTO's rules related to sanitary and the phytosanitary measures, when we are not very much following that, our companies either they are not aware about that or they are negligent about that, then again our products will not be very competitive and we will not be able to generate good demands for our products. And we are already dependent on various products for the imports, for example crude oil, etc. So when our import bill is very high and our exports are not seeing an uptrend, then again that is a component which will driving down our GDP size as well as the GDP growth rate. But in India, the government has taken various measures. For example, for boosting consumption recently, for the upcoming financial year, the tax cuts has been announced. If you talk about the tax slabs, the revised tax slabs from 0 to 12 lakhs, we do not have to pay any kind of taxes, right? In this case, when the people will not have to pay a major chunk of their income as the taxes, they will have more disposable income, which they will be spending in the economy, and that will help in increasing the consumption expenditure. And when the consumption expenditure will increase in the economy, it will further lead to a more goods and services production, which will create more jobs, and further the income of the people will be increased. So that is one of the major reason why government has revised this tax slabs, to increase or boost the consumption or the consumption demand in the economy. Also recently, the Reserve Bank of India's Monetary Policy Committee have cut the repo rate by 0.25%, which will make the cheaper loan availability in the economy, and which will drive down the cost of the EMIs that people are paying. Then again, the people have some surplus money or the increased disposable income, which again they will be buying various goods and services, for example the mobile phones, or they will be spending on the televisions, they will be spending on the various white goods, they will be spending on movies, etc., which will increase the consumption expenditure and further help in reviving the economy. Also, the government has recently announced the 8th pay commission, which will lead to increase in the salaries of the government employees, as well as the pensions, etc., of the government servants will increase. And when the salaries of these people will increase, they will have much more income, which they will be spending in the economy. So with the help of all these measures, government as well as RBI is on the path of increasing the consumption expenditure and further increasing the GDP growth. Then if you talk about the private investment boosting, that what we have seen, that the private investments or the private companies are affected by the animal spirits. That what does animal spirits mean in the economics term is that when the investors are much more impacted by their emotions rather than being impacted by the overall economic policies or the intrinsic value of the investment in the economy. Means their emotions are preventing them from investing in the economy. Why? Because of the lack of policy coherence. That policy is frequently changing. There is in some sector there is over regulation, or in some sector there is under regulation. Also, there are lack of clarity related to various tax laws, etc. So that is the reason they are very much apprehensive. But what the government did, first of all, government has further tried to simplify the corporate tax regime so that the tax compliance of the corporates or the businesses increases. And now after this changes, the 29.5% was the effective aggregate tax on all 8.4 lakh companies, which is much lower as compared to what was the earlier corporate tax regime. If we talk about initially in the corporate tax over the year, in 2091-92 it was almost 57.5%. In 2011-12 it was 36.75%, and it has been further rationalized to 25.17 and 34.9 based on the deduction and exemptions which the companies are taking. So what we have seen, that effective taxes has declined to a substantial number, which will increase the compliance of the businesses. It will be much easier for them to comply with the tax related norms. Apart from that, government has came with various other initiatives like Make in India, where they are supporting the idea of the investment and production in India itself, and the Atmanirbhar Bharat package that came to support this idea. Then the Startup India scheme, Stand Up India scheme, which has helped in increasing the new age entrepreneurship. That is also visible from the number of unicorns that we have seen in our economy. Also, the various schemes like production linked incentive for the large scale electronics manufacturing, it has also came for the pharma sector, semiconductor sector, etc., where the incentives are being provided to the companies on their incremental sales, and that is the reason that the companies are motivated to invest in the economy. Companies are motivated to shift towards more efficient and productive technologies so that they can increase their sales and they can get benefited from their production linked incentive of the government. Similarly, we have this for the government expenditure. We can see the capital expenditure by the government of India has seen a uptrend in last few financial years. Also, various other initiatives like National Infrastructure Pipeline that came for 2020 to 2025, which has covered various sectors like roads and bridges, railways, urban transportation, airports, aviation infra, ports, and the number of projects were around 7,671 and the cost was around 111 trillion rupees, and the duration was 5 years. So when the government is investing on the infrastructure, when the government is going for the capital expenditure, it will help in crowding the private investment, which will increase the investment or which will motivate the private companies to invest in the economy. Also, it will further increase the jobs in the economy, which will further help in boosting the consumption demand. Also, various other infrastructure related schemes like Udan or Ude Desh Ka Aam Nagrik, that is providing the affordable air services to the people. The Bharatmala project, which has aimed at building the robust high-speed road network across the country with the help of the brownfield as well as the greenfield projects, where the expansion of the current highways were also done under the Bharatmala Pariyojana. So with the help of all these infrastructure building schemes, government is boosting their government expenditure or the investment expenditure also, which is helping in economy towards a good or proper GDP growth path. Apart from that, government has also taken various measures to boost exports. For example, the remission of duties and taxes on exported products, which has been a very good scheme and which has created a mechanism for reimbursement of the taxes, duties, levies, which has been there at the center, state and the local levels, and the currently only the particular taxes and the duties which were paid at the center or the state level, they were being refunded before this RoDTEP scheme came into the picture. But after that, all the taxes, whether it is at local level or it is at the union level, all are being refunded. And with the help of this, the companies are motivated towards exporting goods and services. And it will make India exports cost competitive in the international market, and which will boost the employment generation. Because when our product will be competitive, more and more goods and services will be demanded, or the goods are being demanded from the global market, then again it will motivate the private investment to increase the investment in the economy, to increase the production of the goods and services, which will demand more jobs, which will demand more hands to produce those goods and services, and which will further lead to more and more employment generation, and further it is linked to more consumption expenditure. Also, the Export Credit Guarantee Corporation of India Limited, which has been changed to Export Credit Guarantee Corporation, is a government owned export credit provider which is under the ownership of Ministry of Commerce and Industry. It is a Government of India enterprises which is providing insurance facilities to the exporters, so that they are not apprehensive about the risk associated with the export that is happening. So they are providing the insurance facilities to the exporters. So these are the few measures that we have taken. The government has taken n number of measures to ensure that all the four components of the economy are in sync, and they are able to ensure that we are witnessing a proper contribution from all the four components, and we are witnessing a good GDP growth rate. Now, what should be done at this point of time so that we are not only dependent on the consumption expenditure? First, there is need to provide the proper government support, and in this regard, the various things government have to take in mind. First of all, the government expenditure. Government will have to understand that the government's capital expenditure is one of the major component which will crowd in the private investment, which will help in increasing the more and more private investment. So government should follow a path of proper capital expenditure. Also, there is need for focusing on the increased ease of doing business. There is need for simplifying the taxation system. There is need for simplifying or the rationalizing various regulating laws that are there, which has government also done with the help of various codes on the labor laws that they brought. There is need for further simplification of various other laws which are at state level, which are impacting the ease of doing business for the businesses. Also, there is need for improvement on the supply chain. We need to invest in further infrastructure, especially for the infrastructure in the cold storage, in the cold storage, transportation, etc., so that the loss that we are witnessing, especially in the food sector, in the products which have a shorter shelf life, we do not have to witness that, because that will help us in driving down the inflation in the economy with the help of better product availability in the market. So if we will go for the supply chain resilience with the help of more investment in the economy, with the help of more goods and with the help of more resilience in the economy, then we will not lose much time in the transportation, etc., which will make our products ready or competitive at the global level also and the domestic market also. Also, we need to focus on the sanitary and the phytosanitary measures. The government needs to focus on the capacity building of the private companies. They need to ensure that the companies and the employees are well aware about the measures that they have to follow, so that we have a good reputation in the international market about our products, and we do not have to lose our market on account of non-adherence to these sanitary and the phytosanitary measures or the hygiene related parameters that we have to follow. Also, we need to invest in the human capital, the skilling, etc. needs to be focused, and government is also focusing with the help of Pradhan Mantri Kausal Vikas Yojana, etc. Because this investment in the human capital will help us in better employability of these people, and we will not have a dislinkage between demand of industry and what the current skill sets our working population have. And they will be able to get better jobs, and when they will get better jobs, then further it will help in more and more wages they will get, and they will further demand more goods and services, and it will help India in going towards a path of proper GDP growth rate. This was a means practice question that was asked from this particular topic. You people can write this question. So, our second topic is Office of Lokpal. The context of this topic is that the Supreme Court stayed a Lokpal order bringing the High Court judges under its jurisdiction. This particular topic pertains to syllabus of your GS paper 2, statutory bodies and judiciary. So, this Lokpal, which literally means the caretaker of the people or the defender of the people, this office has been set up by the Lokpal and Lokayuks Act 2013, and the section 14 of the particular act defines the jurisdiction of the Lokpal and the Lokayuks. For example, the jurisdiction of Lokpal has been extended to the Prime Ministers, Union Minister, etc. Also, it says that under the section 14, subclause 1, subclause F, it says that any person who is holding any office and that office has been set up by the act of the parliament, then the jurisdiction also lies with that office and the persons who are holding that office. Now, the reasoning given by our current Lokpal in the particular order is that the Supreme Court judges are obviously the public servant under the Prevention of the Corruption Act, but they are not public servant under the Lokpal Act. Why? Because the Supreme Court was established by the Constitution itself and not by any act of the Parliament. But the High Courts pre-existed before the Constitution. One of the High Courts Act 18 that came in 1861, which established the first High Court in India in Calcutta itself, and Constitution only recognized these High Courts. Under the Article 214 of the Constitution, it says that there should be High Court for each state, and that is the reason there are various acts of the Parliament which has been passed to set up various High Courts. For example, there is Act of the Parliament for the Delhi High Court itself. So, the Lokpal says that a judge of an High Court established by an Act of Parliament will come in the ambit of expression of any person in section 14(1)(f) of the Lokpal Act. If you will see this section 14(1) of 1F, it is clearly written any person who is holding any office which has been set up by the Act of the Parliament. So, if there is a person, if the Delhi High Court has been set up by the Parliament and any person is holding the office of the judge of the Delhi High Court, then with the help of this definition, he can come under the jurisdiction of the Lokpal. This is the reasoning which has been given by the current Lokpal, Justice A.M. Khanwalkar. Now, you people tell me in the comment box that who was the first Lokpal in India. Also, you have to understand that there is a precondition to consult the Chief Justice of India before initiating the section 20, before initiating inquiry under the section 20 of the Lokpal Act, a preliminary inquiry into a complaint lodged against a High Court judge. Now, the Supreme Court bench said that, no, we are staying this order because it is against the independence of the judiciary, and this is a phrase which is coming since time immemorial, and no one clearly knows that what exactly means, that what constitutes independence of judiciary. Now, coming back to our discussion on the Lokpal. So, Lokpal is an ombudsman against the tyranny of the official dam. What does it means by ombudsman? It means that an official which is appointed to investigate the complaints against the officials. Now in India, to select the official, they are appointed by the president, okay, on the recommendation of a selection committee which constitute Prime Minister of India, the Speaker of Lok Sabha, leader of opposition in the Lok Sabha, and the Chief Justice of India or any sitting judge of the Supreme Court whose name has been recommended or nominated by the Chief Justice of India, and one eminent jurisdiction. This committee will select the Lokpal, and then that person will be appointed by the president in the office of the Lokpal. If you talk about the composition, the chairperson, there is one chairperson and up to 8 members. 50% of that shall be the judicial members who have held the office in the Supreme Court or in the High Courts. In the High Court, they should have been the Chief Justices, and 50% must come from amongst the scheduled caste, scheduled tribes and other backward classes, minorities and women itself. Now this journey of the Lokpal, this office of ombudsman was inaugurated officially in Sweden in year 1809, and the New Zealand and Norway are the countries which has adopted this office in year 1962 to check for the various complaints against the officials. In 1967, based on the recommendation of this VAT report of 1961, this ombudsman was also set up under the Great Britain, and this was the first instance where the first large nation in a democratic world has adopted this and as an office. In India in 1963, this idea was mooted in the parliament during a discussion on the budgetary allocation. In 1966, the first Administrative Reforms Commission recommends the setting up of 2 independent authorities at central and state levels to look into complaints against the public functionaries, including the member of parliaments. And that from 1968 to 2011, the Lokpal bill is introduced in parliament 8 times, but it could never be passed. In 2002, the commission to review the working of the constitution, it also recommended the appointment of the Lokpal and the Lokayuks, also recommends that PM to be kept out of the ambit of the Lokpal. In 2005, again the second ARC recommends the Lokpal to be established without delay. It was the December 2013, after the Anna movement and India Against Corruption movement, the Lokpal and Lokayuks Bill 2013 was passed by the Parliament. But the first appointment in the office of the Lokpal, the first Lokpal was appointed in year 2019, almost after a gap of 5 years. Now, if you talk about the office of the Lokpal, it have an administrative branch which will be headed by an officer of rank of secretary to the government of India. It will have an inquiry wing which will be headed by officer not below the rank of the additional secretary. It will also have the prosecution wing to be headed by an officer not below the rank of the additional secretary, and they will be majorly looking into the various investigation, etc. Also, it will have a central registry scrutiny wing, establishment, coordination and media publication department, and it will have a budget, finance and accounts department. Also, it will have a judicial branch which will be headed by a judicial officer of appropriate level, and what constitute appropriate level isn't defined, who will assist the Lokpal to discharge the judicial functions. Also, if you talk about the overall process, how the complaint comes and how it sees the day of the lights, that if there is a complaint which has been received and if there is a prima facie case, the Lokpal may order a preliminary inquiry by its own wing or any other agency, or refer it to investigation for any agency. And especially in the case of the central government complaints, it can also refer it to the CVC, that is Central Vigilance Commission. Also, it can refer any investigation to the CBI also. So in a way, you can say that superintendence of the Lokpal also lie on the CBI for that particular case. The investigative officer of that case could not be transferred without the recommendation or without consulting the Lokpal. And the power they have also the Lokpal have also power to authorize CBI to search and seizure for any of the particular case, and the preliminary inquiry report for that particular case needs to be submitted within 60 days, and it should have comments from the accused and the competent authority, which was the reporting authority for that particular officer. Also, based on the inquiry report and after hearing the defense, Lokpal may order a full investigation, direct department action, or they can close the case. In case of investigation, the report has to be filed in a court of appropriate jurisdiction with a copy of at least with a copy to the Lokpal, and a bench of at least 3 Lokpal members will consider this particular report. Also, if the guilt is established, the bench may authorize the prosecution wing to proceed or direct department action. If the complaint is false, it may proceed against the complainant also. Also, the jurisdiction of Lokpal lies to all public servants, including the Prime Minister. But there are some exceptions, that if there is a matter related to atomic energy, the public order, etc., that has been kept outside the jurisdiction. Also, all public entities who are wholly or partially funded by the government, any entity with foreign funding above the 10 lakh per year, they can be also checked by the Lokpal. Also, the search and seizure power under the code of civil procedure, whatever, that they can ask someone, they can summon someone in front of the bench of the Lokpal. Also, they have the superintendence over agencies including CBI for the referred cases which are being investigated, which has been earlier referred by the Lokpal. If you talk about the issues which are associated with the Lokpal, first of all, the large number of vacancies especially in the prosecution wing, and this shows that lack of political will. After the Lokpal and Lokayukt Act was passed in 2013, the first Lokpal was appointed in year 2019 after a gap of almost 5 years. That shows that there is a lack of political will, and still there are a lot of vacancies lying in the office of Lokpal itself. Also, the limitation of the 7 years, that beyond 7 years the cases cannot be filed in front of the Lokpal. Also, another major issue with the particular Lokpal office is the lack of autonomy, or what we have witnessed, that after the first Lokpal was appointed, the Lokpal worked for many months from the few rooms of the Ashoka Hotel itself. They were not even given a proper office to work. So that shows that they do not have the proper functional and financial autonomy. That is also one of the major issues. Also, the lack of comprehensive protection to the whistleblowers, that the person who is coming out with some of the information, there is no any provision of the protection to the whistleblowers, and which is demotivating people to report any of the wrongdoings that is happening. And that was one of the major provision in the Jan Lokpal, or the bill which was being floated by the India Against Corruption protesters. That in the Jan Lokpal bill which was being floated, under that there was a protection to the whistleblowers itself, but in the Lokpal and Lokayukt there hasn't been any comprehensive protection to the whistleblowers that has been provided. Also, the ineffectiveness of the Lokpal, that 68% of the cases that has been disposed without any action as per the various media reports. So that shows that there are very less number of cases on which the actions are being taken by the Lokpal. Also, the non-exclusion of the judiciary, that before this first order, and even this order has been stayed, there was no any coverage of the judicial officers, and there are various reports, there has been various allegations on the judiciary by various peoples, that there are various complaints and the corruptions involved in the judiciary itself. So if the Lokpal jurisdiction will be extended towards them also, it can also help in checking the corruption that is involved in the judiciary. So what should be done? First of all, there is need for functional autonomy and the resource availability, and for that the constitutional status can be provided to the Lokpal also as per the various experts' recommendation. Also, there is need for timely appointment, whether it is in the offices of the Lokpal or under the subordinate employees under the prosecution wing, etc. Whatever the vacancies that are there, that needs to be filled in a time bound manner so that the Lokpal can function normally. Also, there is need for appointment free from political interference in a transparent manner based on the objective criteria, because the selection committee of the Lokpal and the members do have the political members, so it becomes very difficult to make their recommendation immune from the political will or from political consideration, and that is the reason there is need for an objective criteria to appoint members in the offices of the Lokpal. Also, there is need for strengthening other institutions like right to information, etc. That also will help in checking the wrongdoings of the public officials. Also, there is need for strengthening the whistleblower protection. This can come with the amendment to the particular Lokpal and Lokayukt Act itself, because that will help us in people motivating towards complaining about any wrongdoings or any wrong that is happening in the central government. Also, you can see this motto of the Lokpal, that Magridha Kashyadis Vadhanam, which has been taken from Isavasya Upanishad. That means that do not be greedy for anyone's wealth. This is the motto of the Lokpal. This is a main practice question that you people can write from this question, from this topic. What are the main issues faced by the Office of Lokpal in India? Suggest measures to address these challenges. Our next topic is remission without application. What Supreme Court held and why. This particular topic is related to your GS paper 2, Executive, Indian Constitution, Fundamental Rights and Judiciary, and this has appeared in today's Indian Express, page number 14. So what exactly the remission means? Remission means the premature release of the persons who has been found guilty. That is the power to reduce the period of the sentence of the period for the people who has been convicted or who has been found guilty. Now the Supreme Court on Tuesday said that the states to reconsider the premature release of the prisoners even if they themselves have not applied for the remission beforehand. Now why the Supreme Court has directed to states is because of the fact that prison is one such subject which is given under the state list under the 7th schedule of the Constitution. Also, this is again a shift from the earlier instance which the Supreme Court has taken. Supreme Court earlier had said that until and unless there would be an application which would be made by the prisoner itself to apply for the remission, then that person cannot be remitted. But here, what the Supreme Court has taken a shift from its earlier instance, it said that they can be prematurely released even if they did not have any of the application made with the competent authority. And why they have gone for this shift is because of the overcrowding of the prisoners which we are witnessing. As per this data from the NCRB in 2022, the occupancy rate of the prisons in India are 131.4%, in which there are 75.8% under trials. And majority of them are so poor that they do not have even a basic amount to fill their bail bond money. Also, a majority of them are not aware about the various rights that they have available, or they have this apprehension that they will not be accepted back by the society because of the stamp that has been on their face that they are the criminal. Also, there are various under trials who has undergone the maximum sentence for about the crime or for which they may be convicted for that crime. For example, if there person who is on under trial for a theft, and let's suppose for theft maximum conviction is 3 years, and this person is in jail itself for last 4 years. In this particular case, this person can get bail easily, but still he do not have the knowledge about the rights that he has been provided under the CRPC or Bharatiya Nagarik Sanhita, etc. And this power of remission has been discussed under the section 473 of Bharatiya Nyaya Suraksha Sanhita 2023, which was earlier the CRPC, and 432 of the CRPC, which grants state government the power to remit the sentence at any time, whatever they feel is fine. Also, state may impose various conditions based on which they will decide this remission, that what was the behavior of the prisoner when he was going towards the sentence, etc. Also, they can they have to further meet the remission criteria after being remitted, that they might have to periodically visit the particular police station to sign any of the document, or if they are not finding or they are not fulfilling the criteria based on which they has been remitted, their remission might be cancelled and they may further be arrested and they may come under the prison further. Also, the Supreme Court have given further other directions that there is need for every state to create an exhaustive policy for remission within 2 months, and if there is one already in place, it also issued guidelines to build upon its decision on this particular case. And in this case, the Supreme Court has held the eligible conditions must be reasonable. The Apex Court said that the condition must account for various factors, including the motive of the crime, criminal background, and the public safety, that whether the person who has committed the crime, he was saving himself. If that has been proved that only due to the threat that is involved for the life of the prisoner itself or the person who has committed the crime, all those criteria should be considered itself. And the It should also aim to ensure the criminal is rehabilitated and the criminal tendencies, if any, of the convict remain in check. Because we also have to understand that the person who has committed any crime, if the person has got the punishment in proportion to the crime that he has done, or if the person have the remorse of the crime that he has conducted after going for 2-3 years or some part of their sentence, then that person should be given an opportunity to get rehabilitated and get back into the society, or to get properly integrated in the society. That is the reasoning, or that is the logic of the Supreme Court order. Also, it cannot be so oppressive and stringent that convict cannot take advantage of the remission. That the criteria should not be very stringent, that everyone have to follow this much norm. If the person was following these norms only, then he will be remitted. So these are some of the observations that has been done by the Supreme Court in this case. Now, for the prelims pointers, these are some of the committees which you need to keep in mind. There can be a potential prelims question that which of the following committees are related to the prison reforms. The Rajendra Prasad Committee that came in 1953, M.R. Masani Committee that came in 1978, V.R. Krishna Iyer Committee 1983, Malimat Committee 2003, and Justice Amitav Rao Committee that came in 2018. These are some of the prison reforms committee that you need to keep in mind. This you can also use in substantiating your mains answers. Then some of the measures that has been taken by the government to improve the prison conditions to reduce the occupancy rate. For example, the Prison Reforms Commission that came in 1980, that was established to evaluate the prison condition and recommend the comprehensive reforms in India. Then we have the NALSA, that is National Legal Services Authority, which provides free legal aid to prisoners, ensuring access to justice. Then we have the Model Prison Manual that came in 2016, which provides standardized guidelines for prison management, discipline and inmate care. Then we have this Prisons Reform Bill which came in 2023, which aimed to improve the condition, reduce overcrowding and focus on the rehabilitation. Also this Open Prisons Scheme, which allows low risk prisoners to work outside, and promotion of the reintegration in the society so that they get a proper life after the completion of their sentence related to the crime that they have committed. Also this e-prison project, which focused on the e-governance and also focused on the digitization of the prisons record to ensure the transparency and efficiency of the prisons management happens. Also, there was a question from this topic that came in 2023 itself, that in India the prisons are managed by the state government with their own rules and regulations for the day-to-day administration of the prisons. Again, I said the state prison is one of the subject under the state list itself. In India, the prisons are governed by the Prisons Act 1894, which expressly kept the subject of the prisons in the control of the provincial government. Now, you people tell me the answer of this question in the comment box. Our next topic is Article 101 Subclause 4. This is related to your GS paper 2 Indian Constitution, and this has appeared in today's The Hindu, page number 9. So the Khadur Sahib MP Amritpal Singh on Wednesday moved the Punjab and Haryana High Court to attend the ongoing parliament session, lest he will lose his seat because of the prolonged absence from the House. He faces the charges under the National Security Act, and he was detained in Dibrugarh. He has been detained in Dibrugarh since April 2023 because of the various activities that he has done. And he contested and won the 24 Lok Sabha elections from prison itself, but thus far has an attendance of only 2% according to the PRS legislative research data. Because he has been incarnated, he is in prison itself, he cannot attend the proceedings of the parliament. And the Article 101 Subclause 4, it says that if for a period of 60 days a member of either house of the parliament is without the permission of the house absent from all meetings thereof, the house may declare his seats vacant as per the Article 101(4). Now, the 64 days does not account for any period during which the house is prorogued or is adjourned for more than 4 consecutive days. That if house was in session, and only then that 60 days would be considered. And again, important thing is that the period of absence is only calculated based on the actual sitting of the parliament. And the Amritpal, for instance, only attended one sitting of the Lok Sabha in which he was sworn in as the member of the Lok Sabha. Also, you have to understand that the competent authority, that operative term here in the Article 104 is without the permission of the House. For long absences, MPs write to the committees on the absence of the members from the sitting of the House and the parliamentary panel that deals with the issues. This particular issue, what happens, let's suppose in our schools etc., or at the people who are working in the jobs, that if you are not informing your reporting manager, if you are not informing your class teacher in schools, they can take some of the actions against you because you have not informed the relevant competent authority. And that is the similar case that is happening. There are various member of parliaments who has been not present in the proceedings of the House for more than 60 days, but they have taken permission from the competent authority, that is this committee. Then there are various reasons, for example medical reasons for themselves or for families etc. They have taken various they have given various reasons and they have taken permission. Also earlier also in 2023, the Ghosi, which is a seat in the Uttar Pradesh, MP Atul Rai, one of the BSP MP, sought permission to remain absent for 23 consecutive sittings of parliament as he was in jail. So if the competent authority gives a thumbs up, then the person can remain absent without losing his seat. And if there is a person who has not informed the relevant competent authority, that is this committee, and if they are absent, then their house, then their seat in that house may become vacant. Also, if the MP is absent for more than 60 days, the House has to declare the seat vacant, meaning the matter has to be put on vote. Only then the House decides that the person was deliberately outside the sittings of the House, then that the House will vote and then that seat will become vacant. It is not that they were not present in the House, automatically their seats will become vacant. Now, one of the keyword that was in this topic is the committee on the absence of the members, right? So what exactly is the parliamentary committee? The parliamentary committee are the panel of members who are appointed or elected by the House or nominated by the Speaker or the Chairman of the Rajya Sabha, Speaker of the Lok Sabha or the Chairman of the Rajya Sabha, and they draw their authority from Article 105 and Article 118 of the Constitution, and they helps or they provide expertise in legislative scrutiny, detailed scrutiny, and also they act as a mini parliament. Because let's suppose there is a particular decision who has to be taken by more than 500 members, then it will take much time, but the committees helps us in increasing the efficiency of the legislative business, helps us in increasing the scrutiny. Then we have the standing committee and we have the ad hoc committee. Standing committee can be called as the permanent committee. Every year their members changes. These are different standing committees. The ad hoc committees are set up on the case-to-case basis for any of the specific reason or any of the specific matter. Then our next topic is that what mineral resources does Ukraine have? This is related to your GS paper 2, bilateral groupings and agreements, effects of policies and politics of countries on India's interests, and this is related to the Indian Express, page number 1. So the context is that United States Donald Trump on Wednesday accused Ukraine of breaking a deal over the use of its mineral resources by first agreeing more or less but then treating the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who traveled to Kyiv last week, rather rudely, because essentially they told him no. What happened? The current president, after assuming the office, is saying that since 2014 there is a substantial amount of expenditure which the US government did on giving various supplies to the Ukraine's various defense equipments etc. that they did. Now, since Ukraine is not able to repay that in the monetary terms, the president is saying that they should give them access to various critical minerals that are available in the Ukraine region. For example, the lithium, cobalt, titanium, graphite, and some of the rare earth metals like scandium etc. that are present in various parts of the Ukraine itself. And these are some of the elements which are very important for critical sectors like the semiconductor sectors, like the chip manufacturing companies, for example, other sectors like lithium ion battery manufacturing or the mobile chip manufacturing etc. These elements are very much important, very much relevant for all those industries, and that is the reason the US wants access to these rare earth elements of the Ukraine. But still, before the Ukraine came outside the Russian Federation, okay, in year 1991, there were various studies that were done, which has given an idea that, okay, there is presence of these rare earth elements, these critical minerals in Ukraine, but still at this point of time, we do not have any clear substantial idea that what is the amount of these minerals present and what is the cost that it will take to mine, and every other details are not given. Also, it is very much important to get an idea about the various countries which are bordering the Ukraine, that is Belarus, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Moldova, etc., apart from the Russia. Why? Because in 2023 there was a very basic question that was asked from this topic, that which of the following countries border the Ukraine, and that is the reason we keep on emphasizing that focus on the basics. Don't dig much deeper into any of the topics. Don't do PhD on any one topic, right? When the Russia-Ukraine war happened, there were various persons who have done a lot of studies of the Ukraine society, economy, their history, the culture, etc. It seems that they were preparing for the Ukraine Public Service Commission rather the Union Public Service Commission. And there were some of those people who couldn't mark this question correct. Why? Because when you focus too much on the details, you lose focus on the basics. That is the reason whatever the places, whatever the things that are in news, try to ensure that you cover the basic first, you revise the basic first, so that you do not make mistake in the basic questions, because UPSC most of the time focus on the basics first. Please tell me the answer of the question, this particular question, in the comment box. Then next topic is that Information and Broadcasting Ministry warns the over-the-top companies against the obscene content, and this particular topic is related to GS paper 2, government policies and intervention, issues arising out of design implementation of policies, and this is related to The Hindu, page number 14. So the context is that there has been a warning that has been given to the OTT against the transmitting any content that is prohibited by the law. It has been said by the ministry, and they should ensure that age-based classification of content under the IT Intermediary Digital Media Ethics Rule 2021. And this is a reason now you see that whenever any web series is released, there is an age restriction that is given on that web series front initial few seconds only, that it is suitable for all ages, or it is suitable for people above the age of 12 years, 14 years, 18 years. All that information is given as the particular web series starts. Also, the OTT platform should enforce the age gating requirements for mature content, the ministry said in an advisory, citing the complaints from the MPs, statutory organizations and the public. As of now, the directives are that ensure age-based classification, ensure age gating for the mature content, that the people who do not have that much of age, they cannot get access to that people, they cannot get access to that content. For example, there is need for requirement of a login ID and the password which have the date of birth of the person. So if there is a person who is logging in with the ID and the age is not appropriate as per the date of birth that was given at the time of registration in that account, that content should not be visible to that person who is below that age criteria. Also, avoid prohibited content which are obscene, vulgar or pornography in the web series, and they has been mandated to follow this ID rules 2021 for the content moderation, that what kind of content they can show. Also, they has to comply with other laws like POCSO Act, IT Act, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, etc. And in India, the legal framework for OTT regulation, Indecent Representation of Women Prohibition Act, that you cannot show women in an indecent situation. Also, the IT Act prohibit obscene digital content, IT rules for streaming platforms, and Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita expands the content regulations, that what are the contents which will you should not show and what are the content you can show. Also, they have to ensure that there is a grievance cell, there is a self-regulatory body on the OTT platforms, and interministerial panel to look into the complaints if they are not resolved in the first two levels, that is at the grievance level and at the self-regulatory body. Also, if you talk about the over the top, that is based on the emerging business model such as the OTT apps and devices which are utilizing the internet to bypass the traditional infrastructure. Recall our old days, our childhood, that we have that antenna or the dish TV which we have to navigate so that we can watch our favorite TV shows, etc. But now with the help of internet connection, that all those traditional infrastructure has been bypassed. With the help of internet itself, we can watch our favorite movies, shows, web series, etc. Our next topic is the DGCA. This is related to GS paper 2 regulatory bodies, and this has appeared in today's The Hindu, page number 14. The DGCA said that the weekly rest of the pilots could be raised from 36 hours to 48 hours with effective from July 1, and revised night flying hours rolled out from November 1. That there has been various citations, there has been various apprehensions by the aviation companies because of the guidelines of the DGCA with regard to the resting hours that should be provided by the pilots. But now there has been a consultation, there has been an understanding between the DGCA and the airlines, and that is the reason the phased rollout of these resting hours has been ensured. Now this DGCA is a regulatory body in the field of civil aviation issues, and they also look after the various safety issues. They check various airports. They also have the authority to mandate the various parameters that have to followed by the various aircraft, and it is an attached office. This DGCA, or Directorate General of the Civil Aviation, is an attached office under the Ministry of Civil Aviation. It is responsible for regulation of air transport service to, from, or within India, and it also enforces the civil air regulations. It also responsible for air safety and airworthiness standards, and it also looks for all the coordination of regulatory functions with the International Civil Aviation Organization. The headquarters of DGCA is located in New Delhi, and it have a crucial role of developing new airport and modernization of the existing facilities to meet the growing demand of the aviation industry. Also, it is responsible for issuing licenses and certificates to the pilots, aircraft maintenance engineers, and other aviation personnel. Means all these safety issues which comprises that licenses, certification, aircraft maintenance, etc. all that is looked after the DGCA itself. That was all from today's analyst. Thank you very much. All the best. Keep studying.